Well, everybody, after 7 long years, Hollow Knight Silksong has finally arrived and shut down storefronts and united the pirates, apparently. Suffice to say, Team Cherry has a hit on their hands that will keep people talking for months. Since release, I've put about 13 hours into Hornet's journey after just overcoming the final boss of Act 1. That's too early to give any sort of comprehensive review, and you don't need to look very hard to see the critical consensus is that it's an excellent game. But I don't want to talk about whether or not Silksong is a good game as a whole. I want to talk about whether or not Silksong is a good Metroidvania, and in that regard, there's a lot to be desired. In my previous videos, I've highlighted 3 main aspects of the genre that I'll be using to guide my thoughts. The abilities you obtain along the way for combat and traversal, the exploration of the world, and the interconnectivity of the map. I'll start by giving a bit of an overview on how Silksong utilizes each of these aspects before I dig a little deeper with my thoughts. Let's start with your abilities. Hornet comes down with a severe case of sinusitis and starts her journey severely underpowered compared to the last time we saw her. This is a classic setup to relearning abilities we assumed she had before, as well as picking up some new tricks. Abilities come in 3 different varieties: your Silk abilities, tools, and movement abilities. You're also able to obtain different crests, which serve as a way to augment the way you attack and heal. The first thing you do when given control of Hornet is utilize the Silk ability called Bind to heal her wounds. You're able to use this after building up a full spool of silk with melee attacks, and it regenerates 3 health. Not too long into your journey, you'll come across the next silk ability, Silk Spear. This is a handy attack with some reach, and doubles as a way to clear a couple of pesky webbed obstacles you see in the vicinity. I found one other silk ability that, much like the spear, is almost exclusively used during battle. In both cases, the attacks can be used a couple of times per full spool of silk, which adds a layer of strategy. Do you go for a more powerful attack on the boss, or do you save your silk and wait for the chance to heal up? Tools give you both active and passive abilities that can be equipped to your crest. Yellow tools correspond to exploration and resources, like seeing your location on the map. Red tools give you ammo-limited attacks like throwing pins, and blue tools grant you passive buffs like a shield that protects you from harm while you're trying to heal. While only the red tools are limited by a resource in the same way that silk abilities are, your available tool slots are dictated by your equipped crest. For example, your default crest offers 1 of each tool slot at the start, with the option to unlock 1 additional slot per type. However, the first new crest I came across started with only 2 red tool slots, and the 2 unlockable slots were for yellow tools. No space for blue ones at all. As I mentioned before, the crests themselves also augment default abilities like your attack speed or the way in which you heal. Lastly, we have movement abilities. I found at least 3, but there are 2 that are pretty standard for the genre and were also present in the first game: the dash and the wall cling. Holding down the dash button allows Hornet to sprint, which also extends your jump distance. Attacking while sprinting also turns your standard slash into a bit of a lunge. The wall cling works as advertised and allows you to continue jumping and re-clinging to sheer surfaces as you make your way through the map. Speaking of which, there's plenty of map to make your way through. After you take down the boss at the end of the opening area, you'll receive your first major objective: ascend through Farloom to the enigmatic cathedral near its peak as you search for answers about why you were brought here. You'll naturally get lost exploring along the way, but Silksong generally makes it worth your while to some degree. Some abilities mentioned above are required to progress toward your goal, but the majority of others are entirely optional rewards for exploring off the beaten path. For example, the throwing pin tool was found very close to a tricky early game boss, so finding out how to reach it ended up being a massive help in emerging victorious. Aside from optional abilities, exploring can help you find additional resources like a piece of mask to upgrade your health, or even a secret vendor to sell you things that can't be found elsewhere. One last thing you may come across in your exploration are shortcuts back to other areas, which are pretty plentiful in Farloom. There are many times where you'll come to a dead end with a switch on the other side of a gate, so you know it's only a matter of time or maneuvering before you can get to the other side and connect the 2 areas. Just like the first game, there are also fast travel stations scattered throughout. In most cases, if an area does not have a direct stop, it will be within reasonable distance from another one. This interconnectivity is where Silksong's Metroidvania influences shine the brightest. Combined with the fast travel system, there are often multiple paths you can take to reach your destination, depending on exactly where on the map you want to be, or maybe which obstacles you may be avoiding like the plague. And this is where I begin to be torn on Silksong's execution of these elements. Sticking with the map and exploration, I stand by my belief that no matter which path you end up taking, there's usually something worthwhile to find. That first crest I found, for example, was at the end of a pretty painful path full of precision pogos, thorns, enemies, and
Nerd rage!
That being said, it was not worth all that hassle for me and my playstyle. The way the new crest augmented my attacking and healing didn't suit me, so I haven't touched it since. That region also didn't lead me anywhere new, or anywhere that I couldn't have reached by taking a slightly longer yet much less painful route. In this way, the open exploration can be a bit of a double-edged sword. You have no way of knowing whether that specific route is going to be worth it for you until you reach the end of it, and sometimes reaching that end really wasn't worth the sweaty palms and accidentally teaching your children and pets colorful new words, because it also turns out that a fair amount of exploration, plot dependent or not, comes with steep challenges and make it even less clear which direction you need to be going. It's hard to illustrate why exactly this is such a sticking point for me without bringing in some examples of how to do it better. In Metroid Dread, one of the trickiest puzzles to solve in order to obtain 100% completion involves your speed boost ability. You have to activate the boost, jump over an obstacle, kick off a right-hand wall, slide immediately upon landing so you break the obstacles without falling, immediately press down to keep the boost active with the Shine Spark, roll into a morph ball to a specific spot, lay a bomb, then finally jump while in ball form to speed boost straight up to where the missile expansion is waiting. That is an objectively absurd sequence of words to type out, let alone read into a microphone, and it's still less painful than what Silksong will put you through. The distinction between the main path and optional upgrades is even more clear in Shinobi Art of Vengeance. It doesn't have one large interconnected map like a traditional Metroidvania, but every stage has several secrets to uncover, some of which you won't be able to access until you gain a later ability and come back. Much like Silksong, many of those secrets also require incredibly precise timing with your jumps, dashes, and other abilities in order to succeed. Some of those secrets cause me even more of a headache to obtain than what I've experienced so far with Silksong. However, every optional area within a given stage has a purple tint when you're looking at the map. So even if the myriad traps weren't a dead giveaway, all it takes is one quick glance at the map to know for sure that this segment isn't necessary in order to complete the stage and move on to the next. In both of these cases, trying and failing can certainly be frustrating, but the games make it abundantly clear that the player does not have to be doing it in order to move the plot forward. In Silksong, those distinctions are much less clear, if they're present at all. This ties back into how abilities are used as well. The main reason why Hunter's Path, the area with a new crest, is so painful is because of Hornet's downward attack. Anyone who's put time into Hollow Knight will recall using your downward slash to bounce off invincible enemies and obstacles to avoid damage and scale heights, and Hornet has the same skill, only at a downward diagonal, not a vertical. Before the comments section gets there, yes, get good. Yes, there's an area just outside of Hunter's Path where you can practice, but it's still a default ability that requires much more precision, and it's obvious that Team Cherry knows this as well. The main selling point of another optional crest is that it turns your downward slash into the vertical one from the first game, rather than the new diagonal. Beyond that default setting for downward slashes, many of your abilities are almost exclusively used for combat rather than doubling as a means of traversal or exploration. In the 13 hours I've played, I've only used the Silk Spear ability outside of combat twice. Once to free and subsequently fight a necessary boss to continue along the story path, and once to unlock a shortcut within that region. And both of those use cases were in the vicinity of where you obtain the ability itself. This is somewhat uncommon for a Metroidvania, as even later game combat upgrades will often double as a means to unlock new paths, whether to progress a story or further explore for supplemental upgrades. The crest system within Silksong throws a bit of a wrinkle into this as well. Not in an altogether bad way, just in a way that makes it abundantly clear that the developers are blending genres together. Swapping crests for a different style of attacking could mean having less defensive buffs at your disposal, or none at all. And of course, if you value knowing exactly where you are on the map, you'll need to equip a crest with yellow tool slots and keep one slot permanently occupied with a compass. On the flip side, movement abilities do see plenty of use in combat in addition to traversal and platforming. The dash is an obvious one, but even the wall clean comes in handy for certain enemies or bosses who have attacks that take up too wide of an area to simply jump and dash over to avoid. There are many instances where needing to chain together your jumps, dashes, and wall clinging is genuinely interesting and exciting to pull off. It's only the too frequent use of environmental hazards that bring down that particular staple of the Metroidvania experience for me. It feels more difficult just for the sake of being difficult rather than for the sake of being interesting, and it seems Team Cherry has realized this. Less than a week after launch, they announced a forthcoming patch which includes reducing damage from the invincible enemies lining the ground in the final area of Act 1. Lucky players like myself who cleared Act 1 before the patch went live were treated to a hazard that takes off 2 of your health as punishment for missing the precision pogos and jumps necessary to make your way to the area's final boss. In a game that has challenging but fair segments in spades, The superfluous difficulty of other sections makes for a glaring sore spot. Hollow Knight Silksong makes good use of some of its Metroidvania influences. Your traversal abilities and the interconnecting map both stand out in that regard. However, the open nature of optional paths in the early game, combined with the game's use of hazards, can make it very difficult to know whether you're beating your head against a wall to actually make progress, or just to collect another tool or crest that may not even fit your playstyle. This decision to rely on punishing get good segments over a more balanced experience makes exploration the weakest of the three core aspects of Metroidvanias, and therefore hard to recommend to anyone who prefers exploration over finding new abilities or connecting the larger world. If steep difficulty is what you're looking for, things like the crests and tools blend well with the Souls-like influence the original game was known for, so that, combined with the above exploration challenges, may be more your speed. If any part of what I've talked about or shown appeals to you, it's certainly worth checking out on Game Pass or with your hard-earned $20. How have you felt about Silksong's use of genre mechanics? Let me know in the comments, and as always, play what you love and love what you play.